What's going on, guys? Mitesh here. So today I want to start off by first of all thanking everyone who subscribed so far. You guys are awesome. You guys got me over 100, so I'm super happy about that. And if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, maybe think about it. Hopefully this video convinces you to. But moving on, let's talk about today's video. So today I'm going to be comparing the Pixel 2's portrait mode to what you get out of a DSLR with a nice wide aperture lens. So for those of you who don't know, Pixel 2, what it does is it tries to simulate what you get out of a DSLR with a nice wide aperture by doing it all in software. So you get this nice blurring effect when you have a big sensor and a wide aperture. You get this nice blurring effect in the background where everything's blurred out and your subject is super crisp and in focus. So that's just something that Google tries to do in software by just trying to figure out what it should be focusing on and then blurring out the rest of it. I want to see how does that really compare to a real DSLR. So for this comparison, I'm obviously going to be using the Pixel 2, and for the DSLR part, I'm going to be using the Canon 70D, which is actually taking the video right now, and pairing that with a Canon 50mm f1.8 lens. For those of you familiar, this is the Nifty 50. It's a really cheap and popular lens, but awesome for getting portrait effects. So let's get started. So I'm going to be heading out for this, and it's a little cold out there, so let me go ahead and get changed. And let's head out. Alright, so let's take a look at the pictures we took. So we got the Pixel 2 on the left and the Canon 70D on the right. And a couple things to note, Pixel 2 has a much wider field of view, that's why you get more stuff in the background, and the 50mm lens that I use with the Canon 70D is much narrower. So that's why it looks a little bit different, but nothing to worry about there. The other thing to note is the Canon has a 20 megapixel sensor and the Pixel 2 has a 12 megapixel sensor, so if you see a little bit more detail in the Canon, that's why. But moving on to the more important things, let's talk about that blur. So the Canon 70D has a way softer background than the Pixel 2 does, and that is really thanks to that larger sensor that the Canon 70D has. So it, along with that wider aperture, means it's picking up all that depth information and it knows what to blur and what not to blur. Whereas the Pixel 2 has a much smaller sensor and it's doing computational math to figure out what to blur and what not to. And you can see that in certain places, like here, it's a little bit jagged what it kept and what it didn't. And here it's actually blurred out a part of the helmet, whereas right here it's still in focus. So you can see that the Pixel 2 did a pretty good job, but it's not quite up to the level of what the Canon 70D can do with a good lens. One thing I will note that the Pixel 2 did a good job with was the fact that it kept the Stormtrooper in focus. This is what it's supposed to happen. It's not just trying to apply a blur over the entire image. Instead, it's actually getting a real depth map because it's around the same area. It's around the same distance away from the lens. So it's getting a real depth map that it's calculating, and it was right to keep the Stormtrooper in focus here. So good job on the Pixel for that. And I also like the fact that the railing is still in focus on this side. It's also in focus over here, but you can see it drops off pretty quickly. Whereas here it's a little bit more unnatural because right after the railing it just completely drops off versus dropping off gradually. It's just like a very sharp cutoff. But Pixel 2 did an okay job here. Alright, let's take a look at the next one, which is the Stormtrooper picture. So once again, if you look up here in the corner, Pixel 2 had a hard time distinguishing where the boundary was for this. And you can tell it's because the contrast here is not that high. So it seems like it's just blended together, and here it made this a little softer than it should be. Whereas on the Canon 70D, it's a sharp line. Although to be honest, the Canon 70D, this picture is a little bit out of focus anyways. One other thing I forgot to mention in the last picture is the fact that if you look at these figures, their bodies are out of focus in the Canon 70D and they're in focus in the Pixel 2. And that's because Pixel 2 is doing it artificially and it knows that it's roughly on the same plane, whereas the Canon 70D is doing it through the lens and the size of the sensor. So it's actually getting this real information where it is actually blurred out. It's a little bit further recessed than the head is, so it actually should be blurred out. So good job on the Canon 70D for that. Pixel still struggling a little bit with the edges, but overall I think it did a pretty good job. The next one is both of them together, and here you see a little bit of the weakness when it comes to that blurring and that and what Pixel 2 is trying to do. And so if you look right here between the two figures and between their legs, everything is still in focus, whereas what it really should look like if it was real depth of field and if it was really that supposed to be that blurred out, it's supposed to look like this, but it's actually in focus. I can make out that each of the wood pieces in the fence, versus once again on the Canon 70D, it's just completely blurred out. You can't make anything out between the legs or anything like that. So this is something where if you've seen pictures from the Pixel 2, you can tell that it is a little bit artificial. I mean, the picture still overall looks really good, but you can tell that this is all done through computational math versus just being done naturally. And then I have one more that's from indoors, and here I have this Vizio speaker that was very close to one of the figures, and on the Pixel 2 you can tell that the Vizio speaker is completely in focus. It's very sharp and you can make out all the detail, whereas with the Canon 70D, because it's a little bit further back, it's all blurred out and you can barely make out anything in this mesh structure. Here it's all sharp. So that's the differences between fake depth of field and real depth of field. So as you can tell, the Pixel 2 does a decent job. Like, you can tell the candles over here are blurred out, and as they should be, but you can't really beat that large sensor and that large aperture that real DSLR can give you. As a bonus though, the Pixel 2 can do selfie portrait mode, and that's really cool because it's something that it's really hard to do with the DSLR because it's just not comfortable to take a selfie with a DSLR, but with a smartphone it's really easy. And you know, the effects that you get is actually surprisingly good. It knows what to keep in focus. It may miss a couple things here and there, but overall it still does a really good job. And it also works for group pictures. So I have this Buddha over here that I took a picture with, and if you can tell, the Buddha is still in focus. Now, you do get some weird things like around here where my hand is and the pillow. You can kind of make out where parts of it are clear and parts of it are not. But you know what? Overall, the effect is still surprisingly good. I think the Pixel did a really good job with taking front-facing portraits. Alright, so there you guys go. The portrait mode on the Pixel 2 versus the DSLR with a fast lens. Obviously the DSLR did a much better job, but I think the portrait mode on Pixel 2 held its own through most of the pictures. And honestly, that front-facing portrait mode is something that it's really hard to do with the DSLR, and every time that's what I turn to whenever I'm taking selfies. It makes them look so much better. So good job for Pixel 2 for that. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys next one. If you guys liked it, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you guys want to see more. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.